Hello and welcome to another episode of From the Beginning here on Heavenward Thinking. Today we're in Genesis chapter 32, the first half of it, so I'm going to read it and we'll get right into today's conversation. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban, and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, 'Go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper.' I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, 'I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted.'" He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau: 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds." He instructed the one in the lead, "When my brother Esau meets you and asks, 'Who do you belong to?' and 'Where are you going?' and 'Who owns all these animals in front of you?' then you are to say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us.'" He also instructed the second and the third and all the others who followed the herds, "You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, 'Your servant Jacob is coming behind us.' For he thought, 'I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me.' So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp." So as we have been building towards the past few weeks, we're building towards this climatic moment that we don't even get to yet in this chapter. We are still preparing for it. This whole section is titled, in my Bible here, "Jacob Prepares to Meet Esau." So we have this whole section just about the preparation period. And it shows how important this is, that God has been carefully preparing Jacob all along. He had to go through a lot of training, a lot of learning through experiences, experiencing the same deception that he had done towards his family when he was with Laban. And so he had to go through hard work, hard times of deception, hard strife in his family where his wives were pretty much at war with each other. And he had to go through all this preparation time so that God would have him ready for what he needed to do. And what we saw in the previous chapter, Jacob was called by God to go home and to confront his problems. He needed to go back to his family, back to the land that God was giving him. And so he had to go back and face his brother Esau, who we already know, when they last encountered each other, Esau was trying to pursue Jacob to kill him. So we have a serious confrontation coming up. And so Jacob in this chapter, he is, as many of us would be in the same situation, or probably all of us, he is afraid. He's concerned about what Esau might think, what he might say, and certainly what he might do to him. He's afraid of being killed and all of his family and all of his possessions taken. He's very afraid of that. And so we see that he sends messengers out ahead, and they find out that there's all these men, 400 men with Esau coming to meet Jacob and all of his people. And so we see that there's going to be some kind of confrontation here, but we don't know if it's going to be good or bad yet, and Jacob certainly didn't know. So he responded once again in some fear. And he came up with this great idea of, I'm going to divide into two camps so that if one gets attacked, at least the other will be safe. Now, it's interesting to note in this chapter that he comes up with this plan, he devises this plan, and then he goes and seeks God. Then he goes and prays for God's help. He doesn't first go to God and pray for help. Instead, he first comes up with his own great man-made solution, and then he seeks God. And that's a great reminder for us, because I think a lot of us do the same thing in our lives. When we are afraid of something, when we fear someone, something, whatever circumstance we're in, we usually come up with a human solution, something that makes logical sense to us, and then maybe, sometimes, occasionally, we'll seek God, after the fact. And then we'll go, God, I really need your help, even though we've already tried to figure it out ourselves. And so we come to God second or third or fourth or whatever it is on the list, instead of going to God first. And so it begs the question in my mind, what might have happened, and what might his condition have been? Would he have been comforted more? Would he have been in a better state of mind to come up with maybe a more godly plan than to separate and go, well, I hope at least one party survives, if he had actually taken his problem to the Lord first, rather than taking it to himself first and coming up with it himself and then seeking God? And so I would encourage you, as I would encourage myself, we need to think carefully when we have a huge decision that comes up in our lives, or when we have something that we're afraid of. We need to, instead of thinking through human being solutions, we need to come and pray to the Lord and seek his wisdom, his guidance, his leading, and then work on a solution. He may have us use human solutions, but it's going to be with God's guidance. And he may use divine, miraculous solutions. What we need to do is seek the Lord first, rather than seek our own strength out and our own solutions and our own mindfulness out, and then seek God. That is the lesson that we can certainly take out from this first part of this story. But then he does the right thing. He does seek after God, and he reminds God of his promises. He reminds him, Lord, this is what you've promised me. This is what you've called me to. And yet, at the same time, he's very honest that he is afraid here, and he's seeking the Lord's help and reminding God of his faithfulness and his promises. But he's not just bringing his concern before the Lord. He also does something very noteworthy. In verse 10, he says, I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. So he doesn't only just remind God of his faithfulness and remind God of his promises, he is very honest that he is an unworthy person. He knows what he had done in his past. He knew that he was a messed up human being just like you and me. And yet he was willing to be honest about that, something that you and I usually struggle with. We struggle with admitting our faults, admitting our sinfulness, admitting our need for repentance. And here in this chapter, he is open about this. He realizes that he is unworthy of everything God has done in his life and how much God has blessed him despite his shortcomings. And that's the same for you and I. God has blessed us so much despite our failures constantly. And so he models for each and every one of us how we should respond to what God does in our lives. We should be mindful of the fact that we are unworthy of what God's doing. And we should give him the glory, the praise, and the credit, just like he does in this section. So that although he did not first seek out God, and he sought his own strength first, he did get this very right in this part of the chapter. So he has this conversation with God where he's reminding God of his faithfulness, he's being honest, he's being open, and then he decides to spend the night there, and he comes up with another plan that he is going to try to pacify his brother by sending him countless animals, tons and tons of goats and rams and camels and cows and bulls and donkeys and all these animals he's going to send with these servants to try to make his brother be in a better mood. Look, all these things I'm going to give you before I come confront you. And please don't remember the fact that I stole your birthright and the inheritance from you. But here's these animals. And so it's a humorous part of the story when I read this, because we just see he is a desperate man confronting his fear. He is very afraid, and he's trying to do whatever he can to butter up his brother. And we're going to see if he needed to or didn't need to do this later on in the next chapters. But in this chapter, we see that he is trying to do whatever he can to make his brother happy with him before he has to go confront his fear. And I think we do the same thing in our lives today in the 21st century when we are afraid of something or afraid of confronting someone from our past or someone who has a disagreement with us. We try to do whatever we can to butter them up, make them feel good, try to make them happy, and then we give them the bad news or we confront them or something like that. We do the same types of things that Jacob does when he has to confront his fear. And so we can find ourselves easily, I think, in this story. And yet we should be able to learn from Jacob's shortcomings and also learn from the things he did as an example to us. So there's a lot in this first half of the chapter that really sets up and prepares us well for what we're going to look at next week in Genesis chapter 32, the second half, when Jacob wrestles with God. And then after that story, we're going to see what happens when he finally does reach the climax of the story where he has to go back and meet his brother. And so join us next time for another episode of From the Beginning here on Heavenward Thinking.